Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION@CUENDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
The Herald Scotland on Wednesday the 24th of January 2024. From the news section. Almost half of Scots expect their finances to worsen. An article written by Christy Dorsey and read by me, Corey. Nearly half of those living in Scotland believe their household financial situation will get worse in the next 12 months as debts have mounted during the cost of living crisis. The new survey by YouGov, carried out on behalf of the debt charity Step Change, found that 47% of people in Scotland, equivalent to 2 million people, are worried about their financial situation. Only slightly less, 42%, predicted that their situation will deteriorate further in the coming year. Furthermore, 44% said their current financial situation is worse than 2 years ago. We know the new year isn't the easiest time for households in managing their budgets, but our latest research shows just how deep the impacts of the cost of living crisis are cutting, said Sharon Bell, head of Step Change Scotland. Households across Scotland are expecting their personal finances to deteriorate as the year goes on, and when compared to the previous years, many feel worse off, not better. Latest data from Step Change Scotland covering the final quarter of last year shows that 35% of the charity's clients were in a negative budget, meaning their income is not able to cover their essential living costs. Of those responsible for paying rent, 24% were in rent arrears, up slightly from 21% in the first quarter of 2023. A third were in arrears on their council tax bills, and 3 in 5, 60%, face credit card debt. Meanwhile, the proportion of clients in energy arrears showed little sign of going down. Among those responsible for these types of bills, 30% of clients were in electricity arrears, and 25% were in gas arrears. Step Change offers free debt advice to those struggling with their finances. We have support on hand to run through your personal budget, assess your position, and proceed with the best option available, Miss Bell added. It's always best to act quickly rather than wait and suffer in silence. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Christy Dorsey, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland on Wednesday the 24th of January 2024. From the news section. Edinburgh investment giant Aberdeen to slash 500 jobs. An article written by Scott Wright and read by me, Corey. Aberdeen, which is ABRDN, the Scottish financial services heavyweight, is to cut around 500 jobs as it bids to restore its flagging investment business to an acceptable level of profitability. The cuts would amount to a 10% reduction in the Edinburgh-based firm's headcount and are aimed at saving costs by £150 million a year. The move comes as Aberdeen continues to stem the tide of outflows from its investment funds, which have dogged the company since the merger of Standard Life and Aberdeen Asset Management in 2017. This morning, the firm cited challenging market conditions, including high inflation and geopolitical uncertainty, as it reported net outflows of £12.5 billion from its investments in the second half of 2023, leaving it with £366.7 billion of assets under management and administration, AUMA. Taking into account the firm's advisor business, including its interactive investor retail platform, it reported total net outflows of £12.4 billion for the second half, resulting in total AUMA of £494.9 billion at December 31st. It said that around 80% of the targeted £150 million of annual savings would benefit its investment business. Although the company said the bulk of those savings would be in non-staff costs, the cost-cutting plans are expected to result in the loss of around 500 jobs. It noted that the programme will include the removal of management layers, increasing spans of control and further efficiency in outsourcing and technology areas. There are also plans to reduce overheads in group functions and support services. Chief Executive Stephen Bird said, "Market conditions have remained challenging for our mix of business, and this is reflected in our year-end AUMA, flow numbers and margins. The board and I are committed to taking these significant cost actions now to restore our core investment business to a more acceptable level of profitability. Although our business model benefits from the diversification that comes from operating three businesses, we will not rest until all of them are contributing strongly to group profitability, as Advisor and Interactive Investor have done in 2023. The new transformation programme announced today, when completed, will deliver a step change in our cost-to-income ratio. We exceeded our £75 million cost reduction target for 2023 for investments, but we recognise more needs to be done. After a root and branch review, we are now re-engineering and simplifying our business model to remove at least £150 million of costs, mostly from group functions and support services. The programme will largely be implemented in 2024. Completing in 2025. These changes will allow us to continue our focus on building a growth business. Shares in Aberdeen were down 3.25% or 5.6 pence at 166.7 pence as investors responded to the news. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Scott Wright, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 24th of January 2024. From the news section. Harriet Watt Telescope Project to create Space Tech Cluster. An article written by Kirsty Dorsey and read by me, Corey. Construction will begin later this year on the creation of an optical ground station that is expected to spawn a new space cluster within Scotland's growing orbital industry. Groundwork on the Hub Optical Ground Station, HOGS, is set to go ahead at the Harriet Watt Research Park on the western outskirts of Edinburgh, following approval of plans for a new £2.5 million telescope station. It is said to mark a strategic shift for the university, which is looking to establish itself as a base for cosmic research and innovation. Professor Gil Murray, Deputy Principal of Business and Enterprise at Harriet Watt, is now calling on more businesses from across the space technology sector to consider a presence within the research park. Throughout its history, Harriet Watt has been dedicated to addressing the evolving needs of employers, she said. The burgeoning space industry in Scotland represents the latest frontier for which we are actively seeking to cultivate a pool of highly skilled graduates to propel innovation and research forward. Our research park will soon welcome a new multi-million telescope, following in the footsteps of industry leaders such as Celestia UK, renowned for their expertise in antenna systems for satellite tracking, and who have already established their presence here. HOGS aims to demonstrate and test satellite quantum secure communications to counter cyber attacks, and is part of a collaborative effort involving the universities of Bristol, Heriot-Watt, Strathclyde and York, with space engineering expertise provided by the Science and Technology Facilities Council RAL Space Facility. The ground station will support research across a broad range of areas, including space situational awareness, astronomy, astrophotonics, and optical communications. The project is part of a major investment into a satellite mission funded by the National Quantum Technologies Programme through the Quantum Communications Hub. Scotland has end-to-end space capabilities, spanning launchpads and rocket manufacturing through to satellites, data and application capabilities. Approximately 8,500 currently work in the sector, accounting for 18% of all space jobs in the UK. Within this ecosystem, Heriot-Watt is known for its expertise in quantum communications and associated technologies. The university is now aiming for the forefront in satellite quantum communications research, enabling engagement with future missions from national and international teams. Derek Shaw, Director of Innovation at Scottish Enterprise, said the space sector is a key growth industry of the future, and this is why the agency has set its sights on helping the country to become a leading space nation. The industry has been identified as a key new market prospect in the Scottish Government's National Strategy for Economic Transformation, with this opportunity to take a £4 billion share of the global space market, and Heriot-Watt is showing real foresight with these exciting plans, he said. As well as this, the creation of places for innovation is a real passion for Scottish Enterprise, and I look forward to watching this cluster grow into a really thriving community of business, academics and agencies who will take Scotland's space sector into the future. The Heriot-Watt Research Park is the largest and most prominent of Scotland's science parks, with around 1,000 staff working across 28 organisations. As a university, we aim to shape our curriculum to business needs in order to drive inclusive economic growth and prosperity, Miss Murray added. We recently launched a new degree in aerospace engineering, expanding our student offering with the aim of producing graduates ready to meet the requirements of this emerging sector. Any company that works in the space sector and who chooses to set up here will not only have ease of access to Scotland's capital and the Central Belt, but to our raft of talented students keen to gain industry experience and employment. The US-based Space Foundation estimates the global industry is currently worth in the region of $546 billion. That's £432.2 billion. This is being driven by activity in the commercial sector, with consultancy group McKinsey predicting that figure could reach $1 trillion by 2030. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Kirsty Dorsey, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 24th of January 2024. From the news section. Storm Jocelyn brings 60 mph winds and traffic disruption to Scotland. An article written by Jodie Harrison and read by me, Corey. Storm Jocelyn has brought fresh travel disruption with 60 mph winds blowing across Scotland, less than 2 days after Storm Isha left 2 people dead and thousands without power. The 10th named storm of the season brought an amber warning for wind to parts of the country on Wednesday morning, while much of the UK is covered by a yellow alert into the afternoon. All trains remain cancelled until at least noon while engineers check the network for fallen trees and other damage. Dozens of roads have been closed while flights have been cancelled and ferries kept in port because of the high winds and bad weather. Martin Thompson, National Operations Manager for Resilience at Transport Scotland, said, "Across the wider network, we can expect to see more delays and cancellations with ferries, flights and rail into Wednesday morning." Network Rail Scotland said it had dealt with incidents including flooding, fallen trees and a shed roof blowing onto a high wall above a track on Tuesday evening, and would be inspecting routes for damage from first light. A statement said, "It'll be done in many ways. Teams on foot, in road rail vehicles, freight locos, and empty passenger trains. Our helicopter will be out too as soon as winds ease." ScotRail said all lanes will be checked before services restart, saying it will be later on in the day before any trains can run. A search for a person reported to be in the sea at Porthcawl, South Wales, was suspended early on Wednesday. HM Coastguard said rescue teams from Porthcawl, Port Talbot, Latwit Major and Laffstephen, together with an HM Coastguard helicopter from St Athan, were joined in the search by the RNLI's all-weather lifeboats from Mumbles and Barry Dock after the report just before 6 p.m. on Tuesday. They said a decision on further action would be made at first light. The A76 was closed in both directions between Skelmorley and Largs due to the water breaking over the sea wall. The Forth Bridge was open to cars and single-decker buses, with restrictions on high-sided vehicles on several bridges. 8 flights were cancelled at Dublin Airport and 4 at Glasgow Airport on Tuesday evening. An amber warning for wind issued by the Met Office is in place across the north and west of Scotland until 8 a.m. on Wednesday, with a yellow warning in place until 1 p.m. across Scotland, Northern Ireland, North Wales and North West England. The highest wind speed so far recorded was a gust of 97 miles per hour in Capel Curig, Wales. Parts of York have been affected by flooding, with river flooding probable in parts of the north of England on Wednesday, the Environment Agency said. River flooding is also possible along parts of the upper River Severn in Shropshire until Friday. The number of flood warnings, meaning flooding was expected, has reached 38 in Scotland. Forecasters expect winds to gradually ease from the south as Storm Jocelyn moves away from the UK on Wednesday, which will be a day of sunny spells and blustery showers, although mainly dry in the south. Cloud and outbreaks of rain will move northeast on Thursday, with brighter conditions on Friday and Saturday and frequent showers in the north. An 84-year-old died during Storm Isha after a car in which he was the front seat passenger crashed into a fallen tree in Grangemouth, Falkirk, Police Scotland said. And a man in his 60s was killed in a crash involving 2 vans and a fallen tree in Limavady, Londonderry on Sunday night, the Police Service of Northern Ireland said. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Jodie Harrison and it was read by me, Corey.
This is from the Herald, Scotland, on Thursday the 25th of January 2024, from the news section. COVID inquiry. Scottish ministers ignored advice not to close schools. This article is written by Jodie Harrison. The Scottish Government ignored its own scientific advice not to close schools during the second COVID wave of 2021, the UK inquiry into the pandemic has heard. Mark Woolhouse, Professor of Infectious Disease Epidemiology at the University of Edinburgh, said that the decision to shut classrooms across Scotland was not necessary and did not contribute to halting the spread of the virus. Professor Woolhouse, a former member of the Scottish COVID Advisory Group, said that he and his colleagues had argued to keep schools open and that he was baffled by the decision to close them. Schools in Scotland were closed from the beginning of January to February 2021, on the pretext it would stop COVID from spreading. Professor Woolhouse said that this went against the evidence his group was presenting, and that there was no detectable public health benefit in the closures. The infectious disease expert also said that Scottish Government froze in the face of early evidence about the scale of the coming pandemic and was unable to comprehend what was likely to happen. Professor Woolhouse criticised Nicola Sturgeon's phrase, "no death from COVID was acceptable," as naive, and said that focusing on this goal had led to unnecessary deaths from non-COVID related illnesses. Answering questions from Jamie Dawson, KC, Professor Woolhouse said that the closure of schools during the first wave had been justified as there was panic and a lack of understanding about how the virus could spread. But by the time the second lockdown occurred, authorities were armed with better information, and having school children mix would not have been a tipping point to increasing the spread of the virus. But this advice was ignored. He said, "One of the positive elements of the way the pandemic was managed in Scotland was that we were the first nation to reopen schools. I think we did that partly on the basis of the advice which was coming from out of the COVID Advisory Group, of which I was a part. I think that advice was too slow to pivot to it's safe to reopen schools, but it did get there. We reopened them in August 2020, and I thought that was a real success story, an evidence-based decision by Scotland to do something that was safe and that was important to do. I was feeling that being an advisor was actually quite a good thing. We could get things done that really helped." He added, "And then, when we had the January 2021 lockdown, schools were closed again, arguably because this was now the Alpha variant and there was more uncertainty. But it very quickly became apparent that in the second wave that schools did not need to remain closed and we could still control the virus. And yet they weren't reopened here until May 2021. This was unnecessary." Professor Woolhouse grew emotional, saying, "Forgive me, this is one of the aspects of the pandemic I feel strongly about, what we did to the children. It would be bad enough if there was a measurable and detectable public health benefit, but there wasn't. It wasn't necessary, and we did it anyway. I don't understand how we went from a position of being quite evidence-based about school closures to suddenly forgetting all that in the early part of 2021. That baffles me." Earlier, the Edinburgh academic spoke of his frustration with the Scottish Government's "no death from COVID is acceptable" policy. He said, "It's empty rhetoric. It misleads everybody. It misleads the public. It gives an entirely false impression of what the future holds and how this pandemic is going to look." The idea implied by "no COVID death is acceptable" is a world where no one dies of COVID. That had gone. That had gone from December 2019. The COVID expert said that Scottish Government advice not to bother the NHS had led to a huge fall in numbers attending hospital and led to hundreds of deaths. Professor Woolhouse said these people died because the focus of the government was on preparing NHS Scotland for COVID and concentrating on that. Because no COVID death was acceptable, other kind of deaths apparently are. Speaking about the early days of January 2020, when the world was awakening to the emergence of COVID, Professor Woolhouse said he had contacted the Scottish Government with modelling he had carried out, and his concerns about what was being called the Wuhan pneumonia. But he struggled to get then Chief Medical Officer Catherine Calderwood to acknowledge the data, which accurately predicted the scale of the coming pandemic. He said that his concerns had been dismissed as textbook, adding that the phrase was ironically accurate, as his undergraduate students could have worked out the size of the growing threat. However, this seems to elude the Scottish Government ministers and civil servants. He said, "The final explanation for why this information wasn't landing in Scotland is that you put all this together, an unfolding catastrophe, and I think a lot of people simply couldn't get their heads round that. Even though this is very simple, you add this number and that number and this number, and you get a catastrophe. I think they couldn't take that final step." That article was written by Jodie Harrison. This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 25th of January 2024, from the news section. Former miners' dissolvable beauty products set to hit US. This article is written by Brian Donnelly. A former miner turned inventor who set up a business to sell dissolvable products he created has cracked one of the world's biggest markets. Brian McCormack, founder of Fife-based McCormack Innovation, is celebrating after his main distributor launched a suite of his products in the US. Conserving Beauty, the Melbourne-based company which has Elle Macpherson on the board of directors, earlier gave the products a gala unveiling at Space NK's flagship store in London. Now the New York-based company Fig One Beauty has taken the dissolving wipes and dissolving face masks into the US. Fig One supplies US giant CVS Health, the country's biggest pharmacist with nearly 10,000 stores. Mr. McCormack, who claims to have invented the world's first soluble wipe, said, "It's huge. Conserving Beauty, based in Australia, and who are my main manufacturer and distributor of my dissolving wipes, have launched into the USA." McCormack Innovation has also worked alongside strategic partners, including the University of Dundee, to develop medical dressings that will dissolve in seconds when immersed in water, and has seen its soluble bandages praised by experts. The pioneering Scottish company's link with Salts Healthcare of Birmingham, one of the oldest family-run healthcare firms in the UK, has also led to the creation of the Salts Flush Away Wipe, an adhesive remover wipe, which dissolves in water in 2 minutes for people who are living with stoma. He added, "It's been 7 years of self-funded hard work, but first winning the contract to supply leading medical healthcare company Salts Healthcare Birmingham with a medical wipe, then move on to the distribution into the USA with friendly cosmetics products was the ultimate." Starting his inventing aged 60, Mr. McCormack set up near his Kirkcaldy home after twice blasting off the microwave door in his kitchen in early tests to form McCormack Innovation and to forward his ideas. 7 years down the line, he is now giving talks to packed rooms of students, including at Fife College. Mr. McCormack also said, "What I always like to do with this story is inspire young Scots and let them know, yes, your dreams can come true. Some of the best innovation in the world has come out of Scotland," he said. He added that the success gives me and my wife a good, secure retirement and it gives my family security. That article was written by Brian Donnelly. This is from the Herald, Scotland, on Thursday the 25th of January 2024, from the news section. Glasgow motorbike dealer Mickey Oates Motorcycles closes. This exclusive article is written by Ian McConnell. A family-run motorbike dealership in Glasgow that has been operating for decades has closed with immediate effect. Mickey Oates Motorcycles, which Companies House shows as Gordon and Graham Ferguson and Valerie Campbell as directors, says in a notice on the dealership's website from Gordon, Graham and Val, "It's a very sad day for us as we would like to inform you with immediate effect Mickey Oates Motorcycles has closed. The business has changed over the 40 years or so that we have been involved in it as a family, and the challenges of trading over the last few years with reduced margins and increasing interest costs have made this a very difficult time. Over the years we have withstood some tough times and it has taken its toll on us, but the current challenges have been the final blow." The notice adds, "We have a long history in the motorcycle business, especially in the off-road market, and it is filled with great stories and many achievements." The notice thanks staff and customers for their loyalty over the years. Detailing its history on its website, the dealership says, Mickey Oates opened for business in Glasgow in 1961. After a number of years trading from Cromwell Street, the business moved premises to York Street, where it was purchased by Jim Ferguson in 1982. At that time, we dealt mainly with used bikes and scooters. Moto X was in our DNA, so naturally we expanded the off-road side of the business, eventually holding franchises for Kawasaki, Yamaha, Suzuki, Honda, Meiko and Cagiva. It adds, "We relocated to larger premises at North Canalbank Street in 1989, and this allowed the addition of the Suzuki road bike franchise, along with the Vespa range of scooters. Staying with Suzuki, Kawasaki and Honda, we have added Quadzilla quads along with Montesa trial bikes to complement an already appealing range of road and off-road models." That article was written by Ian McConnell. This is from the Herald, Scotland, on Thursday the 25th of January 2024, from the news section. Overseas tourists are flocking to Scotland and spending big. This article is written by Russell Ledbetter. International tourism in Scotland is recovering at a stronger rate than other UK nations and regions, according to new figures. The Office of National Statistics' latest quarterly figures for the International Passenger Survey, IPS, covering the period from July to September 2023, show that there was a total of 1,438,000 visits to Scotland from international visitors, an increase of 6% on the same period in 2022, and a rise of more than 14% on the third quarter of 2019. Over the summer months, international visitors spent almost £1.5 billion, up 6% on the same quarter in 2022. When adjusted for inflation, this means that in real terms, visitor spending in that period was up by 16% from quarter 3 in 2019. The main purpose of trips for international visitors travelling to Scotland last summer was holidays, which accounted for 2/3, 66%, of visits and more than 3/4 of spending, 76%. European visitors were responsible for just over half of all trips during that period, followed by North American visitors. Scotland was the only UK region to record an increase in visitors from North America last summer. Responding to the latest IPS update, Malcolm Ruffhead, Visit Scotland Chief Executive, said, Today's figures are further evidence of the indisputable allure of Scotland for international visitors. Increased connectivity, favourable exchange rates, and pent-up demand have all helped bring more holidaymakers to our shores. Our overseas visitors stay longer and spend more, which in turn supports the visitor economy. They are a crucial market for our industry, particularly while domestic visitors adjust to the impact of the cost of living. For the first 3 quarters of 2023, Scotland has enjoyed a strong recovery, but we cannot be complacent. We must continue building that demand, especially across key markets such as the US, Europe and the UK, inspiring visitors at all those all-important planning stages and reaching them through the channels we know they use. While we continue to navigate the challenging economic landscape, our priority is to use our marketing, partnership work and business support activities to grow appetite for Scotland from all visitors, near and far, and make Scotland a year-round must-visit destination. Scotland is this year hosting a number of big events which are certain to attract international media attention and substantial numbers of visitors. They include the World Athletics Indoor Championships, Glasgow March the 1st to the 3rd, the 152nd Open at Royal Troon, July 14th to 21st, and the AIG Women's Open at St Andrews, August the 21st to the 25th. That article was written by Russell Ledbetter.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 25th of January, Sport. Pep Guardiola asked Alexander Seferin to respect the process. Article written by Martin McMillan. Pep Guardiola has hit back at UEFA President Alexander Seferin over comments the European governing body was right to punish the club for financial irregularities. UEFA banned City from European competition for 2 years in February 2020 for breaching its financial fair play rules, but the ban was later overturned by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The Court of Arbitration for Sport found that some of the charges against City were not established and others were time-barred. Yet, Seferin is adamant his organisation was correct, telling the Daily Telegraph, "We know we were right. We wouldn't decide if we didn't think we were right." His remarks came as City await a Premier League hearing after being charged with 115 breaches of their domestic competition's profit and sustainability rules. City manager Guardiola feels that by speaking out now, Seferin has not respected the ongoing process. Guardiola said, "As the lawyer that he is, as president of UEFA, he should wait, and after do whatever he wants. He has to respect it and he has to wait. He has a lot of jobs to do at UEFA. A lawyer should respect the procedure. He knows we have the right to defend ourselves." Guardiola was speaking at a press conference to preview his side's FA Cup 4th round tie at Tottenham on Friday. City will again be without striker Erling Haaland, but the Norwegian is now nearing a return after almost 2 months out with a foot injury. Guardiola said, "He is on the verge of coming back. For Friday he is not ready, but he is close. The training camp was good. He trained some sessions. The last few days he's trained, but it is not perfect and we will wait a little bit more." John Stones is back in contention after an ankle injury, but fellow defender Manuel Akinji remains on the sidelines. Goalkeeper Edison is also fit after limping off in City's last game at Newcastle. City have lost in all 5 of their previous visits to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium without even scoring a goal. Guardiola said, "That is the reality and shows how tough it is for us. Of course this is a final, a knockout game, and to go through we have to score goals. Always it is a new opportunity to break it. The feeling is most of the times we played really good, but the reality is there. No goals, 5 defeats. So they were much better than us." And that article was by Martin McMillan. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 25th of January, from the sports section, Rangers legend Stephen Davis announces retirement from football. Article written by Stuart Wilson. Rangers legend Stephen Davis has announced his retirement from professional football, explaining it was the right time to hang up his boots. The midfielder, who played for the Ibrox club across 2 different spells, has struggled with injury problems in recent times after suffering knee ligament damage in December 2022. He is Northern Ireland's most capped player, playing for his country 140 times, and was inducted into the Rangers Hall of Fame in February last year along with Alan McGregor and James Tavernier. During his time at Ibrox, he won 4 league titles, 3 Scottish Cups and 2 League Cups. Speaking after confirming his retirement, David said, "It's a strange sensation today, but ultimately it has been at the back of my mind given the nature of the injury and my age. I did some testing 4 weeks ago and I realised I was still a little bit away. It feels like the time is right and I'm comfortable with it. It's been an incredible journey to get to 2 European finals and win the trophies that I have. Share those moments with the fans. Be within the dressing room with your family after the games. It's such a special football club and it goes without saying that I'm going to miss it, but I've had an incredible time here." The 39-year-old also featured for the Light Blues in 2 European finals, playing against Zenit St. Petersburg in the 2008 UEFA Cup final and Eintracht Frankfurt in 2022's Europa League final. Davis was the caretaker boss at Ibrox for a brief period in October last year, following the sacking of Michael Beale. And that article was by Stuart Wilson.
This article is from the Herald on Thursday the 25th of January 2023. It's from the Voices section. The headline is, "SNP may be finished, but history is on the side of Indy," and the report is by Neil Mackay. Recently, I had a conversation with a very high-ranking British civil servant who has worked right at the heart of the UK government. It crystallised my thinking around the future of independence. That senior civil servant is a thoughtful, highly intelligent and genuinely non-partisan individual. They give credence to the case for independence where it's due and credence to the case for the Union where it's due. They are the definition of even-handed. The positions they've held in government mean I can't identify them, but anonymity doesn't erode the relevance of the message. We began by talking about what the implosion of the SNP means for independence. Broadly, polls show support for independence remains steady, with voters basically divided down the middle. The 2 most recent polls put independent support at 46% and support for the Union at 47% and 48% respectively. The previous poll had yes on 51% and no on 43%. Prior to that, the game flipped. No was on 50% and yes on 45%. So really, Scotland is in constitutional stalemate. Most of us appear to have made our minds up. In polling, don't knows run usually between 5 to 10%. Crucially, these polling figures come amid the collapse in support for the SNP. In polling for the next general election, the SNP and Labour are neck and neck on 35%. Long gone are the days when the SNP regularly polled in the mid to high 40s. To me, it's been clear for a while now that support for independence has pretty much decoupled from support for the SNP. Many moderate yes voters are simply sick of the SNP and prepared to give Labour a chance, not in hope and glee and belief in Keir Starmer or Anas Sarwar, but simply to get the Tories out. That high-ranking civil servant believes much the same. The further south you go and the closer to Westminster you get, they said, the more people conflate a rather spectacular political implosion with a collapse of ideas and trends. And that's not true. That's not happening. The level of support for independence is still pretty extraordinary. I couldn't agree more, I said. It's absurd to think that simply because a large swathe of independent supporters have sickened on the SNP, that somehow they also abandon their beliefs. The SNP is not independence, and independence is not the SNP. The SNP would like us to think that's the case, as that tactic has kept it in power for plenty of years. However, many yes voters have cottoned on to that charade and realise independence is much bigger than a mere political party. Evidently, the SNP is today the main and only political vehicle for independence. Yet, this is where the conversation with that high-ranking civil servant got interesting. With some trepidation, we turned our attention to what Irish history tells us about constitutional change. Now, I'm Irish, and I'm also a veteran reporter on political violence in Ulster, so any talk of Scotland following Ireland's path to independence fills me with horror and anger. All I see is blood when I hear that. We've had leading yes figures make the most stupid and inflammatory comments in this regard. However, the civil servant was clear that they weren't talking about violence or extremism when it came to Scotland. Rather, they were referring to the history of the Home Rule movement and its enduring support, despite the collapse of its main political vehicle, the Irish Parliamentary Party, IPP. Without rehearsing a complicated history lesson, by the late 1880s, Charles Stewart Parnell, the IPP leader, was a dominant figure in British politics, much like Nicola Sturgeon or Alex Salmond before her. Then scandal destroyed him. Effectively, as the civil servant noted, the political conditions to deliver Irish Home Rule were gone, but the support doesn't fade away. In fact, support gathers momentum. Sinn Féin rises, the War of Independence begins. The rest is history, very bloody history. Claxon. Scotland won't follow that path. I know that. The civil servant knows that, and neither of us are saying anything even remotely close to that. Ireland's history is Ireland's history. Scotland's history and future is its own. The civil servant summed up the Irish-Scottish comparison perfectly. What this shows is that the collapse of the main political vehicle for independence doesn't mean anything in the long term. In the long term, what matters is support for independence, not the health of the political vehicle to deliver it. So let's kibosh all nonsense of aggressive Scottish separatism and address a much more likely political future. We're going to get a Labour government for maybe 2 terms, but as everyone knows, the Tories will be back eventually, probably by 2034. By then, the SNP may have rejuvenated itself or be dead, like the IPP, and replaced by another political vehicle. Not for a minute am I suggesting Alex Salmond's Alba. Any new political vehicle would have to be moderate, offer wide social appeal, and not pander to a hardline fringe. The civil servant pointed out that as Labour is inheriting a shattered economy and ruined public services, come the early 2030s, the NHS on both sides of the border will likely be in a state of collapse, and the great British state pension not what it once was. Demographics will also change, the civil servant pointed out. Put brutally, young yes supporters will be voting and old no voters will be dying. 20 years will have passed since 2014, leaving the once-in-a-generation argument dead as well. So, you'd have a hefty slice of the Scottish electorate sickened by a Labour Party they put their hopes in, an economy even deeper in the dirt, the Tories back in power, a pumped-up yes movement, and the key reason not to hold a referendum, once in a generation, rendered meaningless. What's implausible about that scenario, the civil servant asked. Nothing. Perhaps then the best outcome for the yes movement is defeat for the SNP. The party isn't going to lead the nation to independence anytime soon. But taking the long view of history, there's a feeling independence has a growing sense of inevitability behind it. That report was by Neil Mackay.
From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 26th of January, from the sports section. Tennis. Djokovic loses at Australian Open for first time in 6 years. Article by Martin McMillan. Yannick Sinner announced himself as a Grand Slam force in stunning fashion by becoming the first player in 6 years to defeat Novak Djokovic at the Australian Open. The 22-year-old Italian was seen as the most likely rival to stop Djokovic claiming his 11th title in Melbourne, ahead of the tournament having beaten him twice in 2 weeks at the end of last season at the ATP Finals and Davis Cup. But surely no one would have predicted the manner of the first 2 sets of this semi-final, with an Austrian Djokovic winning just 3 games. He saved a match point in the third set tiebreak to give himself hope, but there was no dramatic comeback, with Sinner regrouping impressively and going on to clinch a 6-1, 6-2, 6-7, 6-3 victory after 3 hours and 22 minutes. The 4th seed moves through to a first Grand Slam final, while Djokovic, who had not lost here since a 4th round defeat by Hyun Chung amid the elbow problems in 2018, must lick his wounds, with a record 25th Slam title proving beyond him for now. The result was, of course, a shock, given Djokovic's incredible record here. This is the first time he has ever lost having made it beyond the quarter-finals, but it was the Serbian's display that was the most surprising. He committed 54 unforced errors, and did not even make Sinner use his haymaker groundstroke that often, the Italian instead able to maintain a very high but comfortable level and not facing a single break point. Djokovic struggled with illness at the start of the fortnight and had a tougher passage through to the last 4 than usual, losing 3 sets along the way. Sinner, the first Italian to make an Australian Open singles final, had not dropped a set all tournament, and he started as he meant to go on, breaking the Djokovic serve to lead 2-love with a seeding forehand followed by a drive volley winner. By contrast, nothing was working for Djokovic, with routine shots landing in the net or out of court, while he was also struggling on serve. Sinner broke again to lead 5-1 and wrapped up the first set with just over half an hour gone. Djokovic is a master at pacing himself in best-of-5 sets tennis, and he would certainly not have panicked having lost only 2 of the last 17 Slam matches in which he dropped the first set. But the pattern of the match continued in the same vein, with more Djokovic errors helping Sinner break for a 2-1 in the second set. Djokovic worked up crowd support after saving a break point at 2-4 in fine style, but Sinner broke anyway, 2 points later, and served out the set. 2 years ago at Wimbledon, Sinner led Djokovic by 2 sets to love only to lose in 5, so he knew very well that the match was far from over. Djokovic, who had barely showed any emotion, clenched his fist after saving a break point in the opening game of the third set, and he at least managed to serve better. At 5-5 and deuce in the Serbian serve, a medical emergency in the crowd forced a delay for several minutes, but Djokovic held his nerve in the resumption. The world number 1 knew it was never in the tiebreak, and he opened up a 4-2 lead, but Sinner surged back, creating match point at 6-5 but netting a forehand, and a backhand over the baseline 2 points later gave Djokovic a lifeline. He was still hanging on though, saving 3 break points in the second game of the 4th set, only to then be broken from 40-love 2 games later. Djokovic forced Sinner to serve it out, but the Italian did not waver, clinching the biggest win of his life with a forehand winner. And that article was by Martin McMillan. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 26th of January, from the sports section, Jurgen Klopp to leave Liverpool at end of season in shock exit. Article by Aidan Smith. Jurgen Klopp has shocked the world of football by announcing he will stand down as Liverpool manager at the end of the season after admitting he is running out of energy. The 56-year-old German, who has led the Reds to 6 major trophies since taking charge in October 2015, said he informed the club's bosses of his decision to leave back in November. Klopp admitted he expected those outside the club to laugh about his exit and use it as an excuse to disturb Liverpool, but called on everyone connected to the Reds to rally around for a glorious finale. His departure has immediately led to speculation over who will succeed him in the Anfield hot seat. Former Reds midfielder Xavi Alonso, who is one of the hottest coaching properties in the world after leading Bayer Leverkusen to the top of the Bundesliga, is the early bookmakers' favourite, while former captain Steven Gerrard is also sure to be in contention. I love absolutely everything about this club. I love everything about the city. I love everything about our supporters. I love the team. I love the staff, Klopp told his club's official website. I love everything, but that I still take this decision shows you I am convinced it is the one I have to take. Is it that I am, how can I say it, running out of energy? I have no problem now, obviously. I knew it already for longer that I'll have to announce it at one point, but I am absolutely fine now. I know that I cannot do the job again and again and again and again. Klopp joined Liverpool as the successor to Brendan Rodgers and arrived with a strong CV, having taken Borussia Dortmund to successive Bundesliga titles in 2011 and 2012 and to the 2013 Champions League final. His greatest achievements to date with the Reds are the Premier League title in 2020, when they became the only other club than Manchester City to secure the top flight crown in the last 5 seasons, and winning the Champions League in 2019. The Reds have also won the FA Cup, League Cup, Club World Cup and UEFA Super Cup during his time in charge. Liverpool are still in the hunt for 4 competitions this season, and Klopp is determined the club can shut out the chatter and the sniping from outside and end his era on a high. Let's now really go for it. The outside world want to use this decision, laugh about it, want to disturb us, he said. We are Liverpool, we went through harder things together. And you went through harder things before me. Let's make a strength of it. That would be really cool. Let's squeeze everything out of this season and have another thing to smile about when we look back into the future. Mike Gordon, the president of the Family Sports Group which owns Liverpool, said the club would take a business-as-usual approach to Klopp's exit. Gordon said, "It goes without saying that we will be hugely saddened to lose not just a manager of such calibre, but a person and leader for whom we have enormous respect, gratitude and affection. At the same time, we fully respect his wishes and the reasons why he has decided the current season will be his last at Liverpool. In keeping with Jurgen's expressed wishes, we will save the comprehensive tributes for a more appropriate time, but, nevertheless, we would be remiss if we did not take this opportunity to reaffirm that his appointment remains one of the greatest blessings of our time as owners. The incredible achievements of the intervening years speak for themselves, so too does the joy that Jurgen and his team have brought to all of us supporters. His many accomplishments will never be taken for granted." An article written by Aidan Smith.
The Herald on the 26th of January and the Voices section. Food matters. Time for food lovers to banish dreaded first date dinners by Sarah Campbell. There are very few times in life I dread the thought of a meal. In fact, I'm not ashamed to say I'm one of those people, the kind who will quiz co-workers on their packed lunches or dinner plans and gleefully look upon the menu online the night before to ensure I'm well prepped before the waiter arrives at the table. But as a woman in her late 20s who has slowly learned that dating apps are an online wasteland where the worst of humanity congregates, there's one exception to an otherwise unwavering love for all things food: dinner dates. But you've just written a top 10 that's all about romantic restaurant dates. This is true, because I realise that not everyone is as much of a wuss as I, and that they might consider the only positive of a dull date to be a plate of food for distraction. More than that, I'm a firm believer in the idea that sharing a good meal with someone you love is one of life's greatest joys, and speaks to the power our food holds for creating human connections. Here I must make my case for first date dinners to be banned forevermore. Let's stop pretending that it's fun to sit and ponder if the other person might want to share small plates or choose their own, or if they're two are going to go for the large glass of wine instead of medium, or if that tomato red arrabbiata pasta is really worth the risk of a stained shirt. And whoever enjoyed a meal more for having to stop and start the conversation, fork suspended in midair as you answer the dire, "Where did you grow up? What do you do in your spare time?" type questions that are ubiquitous in a first-time meeting. No, for someone whose professional and personal life so often revolves around food, I draw the line here. Go play mini-golf or something equally inoffensive instead, and wait until you know your new friend well enough to point out they have spinach stuck in their teeth without causing embarrassment. Perhaps the only situation more daunting than a dinner date with another Adam, Matthew, Jamie, 29, loves Jim Sundays and Christopher Nolan films is a restaurant reservation with an acclaimed food critic whose work you've read religiously for close to a decade. You see, although our ever so professional headshots often sit side by side on these pages, until last week I had never met the Herald's Ron McKenna, despite often citing him as an inspiration. It was surreal to see a master at work, and later read the exact meal I had shared translated so well into a balanced review that it fully encapsulated the full experience in print, from the lackluster prawn paradelle to a punchy pesto sauce that saved the day. I'd be green with envy of his skills if I wasn't so impressed. You can read Ron's review of Il Pastillo in Glasgow city centre here and find his next drink posted on the Herald website this weekend alongside all of our latest food and drink updates. For anyone who's choosing to go out for dinner for the first date in Valentine's Day, I commend you on your bravery and wish you the best luck. Just try your best not to talk with your mouth full. And that was by Sarah Campbell.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 29th of January, from the news section. Glasgow to Edinburgh train disruption due to works. Article written by Gabriel Mackay. A major rail line between Glasgow and Edinburgh will close for 4 days as safety works are carried out. Engineers will install specialist netting and rock anchors in the 100-metre long rock cutting to the east of the old Ratho station due to the risk of rocks falling into the line. The sub-zero temperatures in Scotland's winter make fracturing of the rock more likely and could cause the cutting to deteriorate further. As a result, the line will be closed from January the 29th until February the 2nd, with a resultant impact on train services in the Central Belt. Glasgow to Edinburgh via Falkirk High, services will terminate at Linlithgow, with no services between Edinburgh Waverley and Linlithgow. Dunblane Edinburgh services will terminate at Falkirk Grahamston. There will be no train service between Edinburgh Waverley and Falkirk Grahamston. Edinburgh Helensburgh/Mulgai services will terminate at Bathgate. There will be no train service between Edinburgh Waverley and Bathgate. ScotRail Inverness to Edinburgh services will run via Fife and will not call at Stirling. Passengers looking to travel directly between Edinburgh and Glasgow can use the services which run via Shotts and Carstairs. Liam Sumter, Network Rail Scotland Route Director, said, "The work we are delivering is vital to the safe running of the railway and cannot be completed without a short closure of the line. We understand the inconvenience this project will cause to our customers and have put in plans in place that deliver these improvements as quickly as possible. We thank passengers for their patience while we complete this safety-critical work." Phil Campbell, ScotRail Customer Operations Director, said, "Due to these engineering works, there will be significant disruption to the services ScotRail can operate between Edinburgh and Glasgow, Bathgate, Linlithgow, Stirling and Inverness. We understand the disruption this will cause to customers' journeys, but it is essential that Network Rail carries out these works. ScotRail's advice to customers travelling between Edinburgh and Glasgow via Falkirk High or via Bathgate and between Edinburgh and Dunblane is that you should only travel if your journey is essential. Customers travelling between Inverness and Edinburgh should also be aware that journey times may be longer as those services are diverted via Fife. We're working hard to finalise plans to provide alternative travel and will communicate that to customers in the coming days." And that article was written by Gabriel Mackay and read by me, Ian. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 29th of January, from the sports section. Jack Butland on the Rangers trait that will be key to their title bid. Article written by Christopher Jack. Jack Butland can take heart and encouragement from the numbers games that sum up Rangers' strength and depth. It could yet all add up to a tally that is insurmountable in the Premiership. An 18th clean sheet of the campaign earned Rangers a valuable 3 points against St Mirren on Saturday. Butland once again played his part in the victory that was earned by the man at the other end of the park, as Cyril Dessers netted the only goal of the game. The keeper pointed to the 2 red shirts in front of him as crucial to the achievement, though. The partnership between Connor Goldson and John Souttar was perhaps not the one that many supporters expected to start in Paisley. Goldson was always set to return to the team after missing the win at Easter Road through suspension, and, with Ben Davies still absent through injury, the choice was between Suter and Leon Balogun. The Scottish defender got the nod and then repaid Philip Clement's faith in him. A late block to deny Alex Gogic perhaps encapsulated the afternoon for Rangers. It was one where they had to do whatever was necessary to get the job done, where individuals had to stand up and be counted for the good of the collective. Suter did just that as he threw himself in front of a Gogic drive with just 5 minutes remaining in a challenge that was similar to one he produced on Wednesday evening, as he and Balogun kept Hibernian at bay. It wasn't lost in Butland. A few of the boys could have got man of the match, Butland said as he reflected on a victory that keeps Rangers within touching distance of Celtic at the top of the table. It went to Cyril and he thoroughly deserved it, but I thought Suits and Connor were fantastic. Difficult conditions to play in, difficult as a keeper to come and help out, and you're relying on the boys in front of you to win their battles, and I thought all over the pitch the boys did that. Fully earned that clean sheet. Saying he's an old school defender would do him a disservice really. He has got that, but he can play with the ball as well. He is a top defender for us and we're really happy to see him fit. When he is coming in, he's doing a great job with the last two performances, on the right side and the left side. We have got a great selection of defenders and we're really happy about that. The central partnership has been chopped and changed throughout the campaign as Suter, Balogun and Davies have competed for a single berth. Behind them, Butland has been an ever-present in the Premiership. In his first term at Ibrox, the Englishman has been a commanding presence between the sticks and a powerful voice in the dressing room. Butland rightly takes pride in his own standards and own statistics, but it is the endeavours and achievements of the team that matter most. In that regard, Rangers are very much on the right track, and 2 Premiership wins, on the back of a Scottish Cup success at Dumbarton, represent a pleasing return to action after the winter break for Clement's side. Clement will continue to mix and match the man that fills the jersey alongside Goldson. The constant change does not bother Butland, and the 30-year-old is well aware of the importance of maintaining their impressive shutout record. Come May, it could well define Rangers' title bid. Whoever it is, you learn each other's strengths and weaknesses, and you learn how to play and you become accustomed to each other, Butland said. We have a good selection of centre-backs for the manager to choose from, all of which over the course of the season have stepped in and done a really good job. For us, that is really important. All season long, despite losing some games we shouldn't have, we have got a good run of keeping clean sheets. It is something that is really important for us. Games like this, it becomes a draw or a last minute trying to push for victory if you don't. For us to keep those clean sheets makes everybody's job a lot easier, but it starts at the front. Defensively we are solid. We are not as open as we have been at times, and there are games when it might go down to it's a clean sheet for the keeper, but I have not had a lot to do. This is what we are trying to be as a squad, and it is something we are focusing on in each game, to go out and get one. The first hat-trick of fixtures after the top flight shutdown have been very different affairs for Rangers. Each obstacle has been taken in its own merits and ultimately passed. Saturday was perhaps the most difficult, as a combination of testing conditions and a solid St Mirren made for a tricky afternoon for the visitors. The first half strike from Dessers was all that Rangers needed in the end. This was far from a classic encounter, but its significance will only become clear in the fullness of time as another win was recorded and the momentum ticked over once again. It is the same as the other night, it's 3 points up for grabs, Butland said. We've got the result that we wanted. Different conditions, different pitch allows you to play a different style of football. Look, that is part of the beauty of the league. It is different challenges. You've got to switch your heads from Wednesday night to today and what the conditions in the opposition require to get the job done. I thought we did a brilliant job of that. We handled the conditions really well. We chose the right options and at the right time. First half we weren't quite as we wanted to be. Second half we had a lot more control and dominated the game from there. St Mirren are a good side, and the games that we have played against them before, it has taken some work to break them down. They're a solid team that are doing well this year. Nobody is going to roll over and give you those opportunities. Sometimes the scorelines don't reflect that. They have defended really well, but they're the games that you can ultimately slip up on. You can't afford to be complacent in this league, and there is one thing about this squad: we are developing that killer edge that you need to make sure that we come to places like this and get the result. As told to Christopher Jack. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 29th of January, from the sports section. Joe Hart hails Celtic for powerful moves and makes Matt O'Reilly call. Article by Matthew Lindsay. Joe Hart has hailed Celtic for turning down a bid from Matt O'Reilly from Atletico Madrid and expressed confidence the playmaker will not let speculation about his future have a detrimental impact on his form. Spanish club Atletico had wanted to take Danish internationals O'Reilly on loan until the end of the season and then buy him during the summer, but their offer was rejected by the Scottish champions. Brendan Rodgers last week stressed the midfielder, who has also been linked with La Liga leaders Girona and Serie A challengers Inter Milan in recent weeks, will not leave during the January transfer window. Hart is pleased that his teammate will be remaining at Parkhead and is certain he will carry on giving his all in the months ahead as Celtic attempt to retain the cinched Premiership and Scottish Cup trophies. Asked if he thought O'Reilly would be unsettled by the interest in him, the former England internationalist said, "That's for Matt to talk about. I can only support him as a teammate. He is an excellent player and someone I love playing with and being part of from a social point of view. When you play at the levels he's at, people are going to be interested. Such is life, but he shows his commitment every single day to what we're trying to do, and long may that continue." Meanwhile, Hart has also welcomed Celtic tying up centre-half Cameron Carter-Vickers, who had attracted the interest of several Premier League clubs during the transfer window, on a new 5.5-year deal that keeps him at Parkhead until 2029. Powerful moves, he said. Cam is a top player and he's loved here, rightly so, for the performances he puts in. He does it away from prying eyes as well. He is a top professional. I knew him from Tottenham and he is a pleasure to play with. I'm on the other side of the Cameron and Matt O'Reilly situations, and I'm pleased about that because I can just focus on playing football. And the article was written by Matthew Lindsay. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 29th of January, from the features section. NewsQuest in £6 million support for NSPCC in anniversary year. Article written by Joshua Serrell. NewsQuest has announced a major partnership with the NSPCC worth more than £6 million to support the children's charity's work across the UK. From January and throughout 2024, the leading regional news publisher will join forces with National Child Protection Charity NSPCC in its 140th anniversary year. As part of the partnership, NewsQuest is gifting at least £6 million worth of advertising to the charity across its extensive portfolio of titles, online and in print. Henry Furr Walker, NewsQuest CEO, said, "The work of the NSPCC and, in particular, Childline is so important, and we want to do our bit to support this. This will be the largest ever initiative NewsQuest has run in support of a single charity, and we hope that it will make a real difference to the NSPCC in the amazing work that they do preventing abuse and helping rebuild children's lives." The NSPCC was launched in 1884 and has helped millions of children in the last 140 years, while Childline was founded by Dame Esther Ranson in 1986 and joined the charity in 2006. The partnership will include a series of advertising and editorial activities throughout 2024, with the aim to drive more public awareness and funding for the charity. These include supporting NSPCC initiatives, such as promoting local workshops and digital training sessions to help people spot the signs of abuse and neglect, ongoing appeals such as legacy giving, as well as NewsQuest staff participating in volunteering and fundraising during the year. Sir Peter Wanless, CEO of the NSPCC, said, "We estimate that 500,000 children across the UK suffer abuse each year, so our mission at the NSPCC is to make sure that everyone plays their part in keeping children safe. We are hugely grateful to NewsQuest for this amazing opportunity to give readers greater insight into the work of our staff and volunteers, as well as how they can protect children. In the coming months, articles will feature in a range of ways to fundraise and donate, which will help us continue our vital services such as the NSPCC helpline, Childline, and our work in schools to helping children understand healthy and safe relationships. We will also signpost the workshops and resources to help parents and carers with everyday challenges and highlight our ongoing campaigns that put the spotlight on children and their safety. NewsQuest publishes over 200 titles across the UK and has a monthly digital audience of more than 50 million users. Many of its local titles are read, online and in print, by more than 75% of the local population. In the article was by Joshua Serrell.
The Herald on the 30th of January and the news section. Barely a third of A&E patients seen on time at Glasgow Super Hospital by Tom Gordon. Waiting time performance across Scotland's A&E units deteriorated again last week, with almost 2 in 5 patients waiting too long for treatment. Glasgow flagship £850 million Queen Elizabeth University Hospital had the worst performance on record, with barely a third of its A&E patients, 35.7%, seen on time. The latest figures from Public Health Scotland showed 1,120 patients in the hospital alone spent more than 4 hours in A&E, with 535 waiting 8 hours and 200 waiting 12. Across the country, Public Health Scotland reported only 62% of people attending A&E was seen within the official 4-hour target, down from 64.1% of the previous week. The 7 days to January 21 also saw more people enduring long waits. The number of patients waiting more than 8 hours in A&E rose from 3,266 to 3,831, 14.2 to 16.2% of patients, with those waiting for 12 hours up from 1,684 to 1,912, 7.3 to 8.1%. The target is for 95% of patients to be admitted, transferred, or discharged within 4 hours. It has not been met nationally since July 2020. The worst performing health board last week was NHS Forth Valley, with 47.7% of patients seen on time, followed by NHS Lanarkshire, 56%, and NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, 56.2%. Decline in performance Scotland-wide coincided with an increase in attendances from 23,043 to 23,615, of whom 8,963 waited longer than the 4-hour target time. Scottish Liberal Democrat leader Alex Cole-Hamilton said the figures showed long A&E were the new normal, and years of SNP ministerial disinterest are coming home to roost. He said SNP Health Secretary Michael Matheson, who faces an MSP expenses probe, has been too distracted by salvaging his career to focus on the needs of staff and patients. Scotland needs a government laser-focused on the day job, Mr Cole-Hamilton said. Scottish Liberal Democrats would overhaul the NHS recovery plan, bring forward an urgent inquiry into the hundreds of avoidable deaths linked to the emergency care crisis, and implement measures which will meaningfully tackle burnout amongst staff. Tory MSP Dr Sandesh Gulhane added, "These shameful and worsening figures expose the true crisis that plagues our E&E departments after 16 years of the SNP's dire workforce planning and mismanagement of our NHS. Successful health secretaries have failed to provide the resources my hard-working NHS colleagues need, leaving patients facing dangerous and unacceptable waits in our emergency wards. It's simply not good enough. Excessive delays in A&E lead to unnecessary loss of life. Yet Michael Matheson has failed to tackle this growing problem, instead continuing the legacy of NHS failure started by his predecessors. If he refuses to quit, the discredited and distracted Health Secretary must finally get a grip on this crisis." And that was by Tom Gordon. The Herald on the 30th of January and the news section. Caithness mothers left with PTSD after horrific births, by Caroline Wilson. Women are saying no to more children in an area of Scotland facing population decline because of horrific and terrifying birth experiences that have left many suffering from psychiatric disorders. Most first-time mothers in Caithness or anyone with a higher risk pregnancy faces a 3-hour journey to Inverness because it's the area's hospital was downgraded to a midwife-led unit in 2016 for safety reasons due to consultant shortages. New research has shed light on the traumatic experiences of women who are forced to make 100-mile or more journeys in labour to Regmore Hospital along the A9, in some cases where their nearest hospital is 15 minutes away. One mother says cuts in maternity provision risked depopulating the area in the same way as the 19th century Highland clearances. She said today in 2024, just a few generations later, the people of the far north face a new clearance, and it is, once again, economic. Remove the vital services, including healthcare, and the population will again be forced to move to the faraway cities, leaving this once beautiful and vibrant county to become nothing more than a vast wind farm. Women describe pregnancies filled with anxiety because they were away. They would be required to travel hundreds of miles on a road that is frequently blocked in winter, and told of their fears that they would give birth in a lay-by. One mother said some of the joy of having her first child has been replaced by panic and worry, while another said her childbirth experience has left her suffering night terrors. She said the experience has made me unsure about having more children, as I don't feel I could go through that again without some serious detriment to my mental health. Another woman who was an emergency transfer said she could have lost a baby during the long journey. Interviews involving 178 mothers found that more than 85% had given birth at Regmore Hospital, and 83% said they didn't feel as if they had any choice in this. One mother said, had a horrendous journey to Regmore in the back of an ambulance, strapped to the chair. Was in labour, no gas and air. It was a horrendous journey where I was sick the whole way. Another said horrific. Peak NC 500 tourist season. Unpredictable driving. Scared if anything happened during the drive. It was an awful car journey of nearly 3 hours of contractions. A report by the Highland Council following last year's census warns that areas of the Highlands are being drained of people in the Western Highlands, Sutherland and Caithness in particular. Caithness has a population of 25,347 people, and birth rates here and across Highland have decreased over the last decade. In 2020, there were 197 live births. From 2002 to 2021, there's been a 42% increase in the 65-plus age group and a 17% reduction in those aged under 16. One woman said she developed PTSD and is still on daily medication to live a normal life. Many describe giving birth in a high-pressured environment at Regmore, being denied appropriate pain relief, and feeling as if they had been forced into inductions that were planned to suit bed numbers. Hannah Perrywood from Thurso had to book into a B&B near Regmore when she went into labour with her first baby, Peyton, in 2022 because she was told by midwives that she wasn't ready to be admitted and the hospital accommodation that is used by staff was full. I was quite a bit of pain, but they said I didn't look like someone who was about to give birth, so they sent me back to the B&B, said the 36-year-old who was a manager for BT. Within 15 minutes, I was back in the hospital having my baby. They apologised, she said. It was very overcrowded in the hospital. You could tell they were trying to push me back to the B&B for a reason. There wasn't space for us. You can claim money back, and that's fine, but I'm sure people who can't afford the £80. My sister, who was pregnant at the same time, came down the following day and had an even worse experience, she said. She was in labour and they induced her, and they shouldn't have. She didn't recognise the feelings. It was her first as well, and there was no space within wards. She wouldn't be able to have her second baby in Wick because she has a blood complication. The situation has sort of put her off having another baby and living here as well. She had a second child, Penelope, at Caithness General in May 2023 and describes it as a fantastic experience. She was told her baby was only the fourth to be born there that year. It all went brilliantly, but I was told I had to phone when I was in labour to make sure they had the staff to get for me to go to Wick, said the mum, who's married to Darren, 30, a financial advisor. The midwives were excellent. They spent millions on this new unit, and you can see that. It was beautiful, and I think some people are scared, so I think it's important to say that it's a good experience for most. She said a friend and her husband had to make the 7 trips to Inverness during her pregnancy because she experienced bleeding. She said her mental health was affected and when you see it when she had her baby. It might have been different if she had been able to pop through to Wick. Ashley Miller, 35, who lives in Wick, is mum to Alfie, 15, and Rosie, 9, who were both born in Caithness General before the service was downgraded. She had planned caesarean sections before her pelvis was too small to deliver vaginally. If we were to make the decision to have a baby number 3, we would have no choice but to go down to Inverness, she said. So my husband and I actually made the decision not to have any more children because of that, because it would put my anxiety levels through the roof. Maria Keese, who led the research, is secretary of the Caithness Health Action Team, CHAT, a campaign group that was formed after maternity services were downgraded. They want to see the maternity model used in Orkney replaced in Wick, which is midwife-led, but supported by a consultant and allows most women to give birth locally. She said her own daughter was among the mothers who have decided against having any more children. She said the basic human rights for women and babies are not being considered nor met, and the survey results from women clearly describe this. Women were terrified of the dangerous journey in labour, and this feeling of intense fear travelled with them throughout their pregnancy. A spokesman for NHS Highland said it has emergency protocols in place to ensure women can be transferred to Regmore in cases of adverse weather, and said the board is currently carrying out an internal review of maternity services. He added, "We continue to work with the Scottish Government in respect of ensuring we move forward optimising the possibility of both midwifery and consultant-led births across Highland and Isle and Argyll and Bute." And that was by Caroline Wilson.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, rate and review, and to tell your friends about our service.